The crowd in front of Buckingham Palace froze. The guardsman moved. Just for a fraction of a second, just the tiniest moment, but his head turned, and he looked directly at Jack. And then he nodded. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted. Someone grabbed their head in disbelief. This was impossible. A tourist who, just minutes ago, was simply reading a book had shattered a system that had stood for centuries. But what happened next? That became a sensation. Let's start from the very beginning. This channel won't survive without your subscription and likes. Help me! London was going about its usual business. As always, tourists crowded around Buckingham Palace, some filming the guards, others trying in vain to provoke a reaction. But the guards stood still like statues, their towering bearskin hats making them look even more unshakable, like time itself. The expectations were always the same. The British guards don't react. But today, among the crowd, was someone who didn't believe in rules. A tall man with a strong posture, dressed in a gray jacket, a worn backpack slung over his shoulders, walked across the square with quiet confidence, as if savoring the moment. Jack Henderson, American, 32 years old, a traveler, a rebel by nature. In his eyes flickered a dangerous spark, a mix of defiance and recklessness. He gripped a leather-bound book in his hands. This wasn't just a book. This was his way to break the system. Jack knew the rules, but what if they could be bent? They don't laugh. They don't speak. They don't move. But what if you make them listen? He muttered, flipping open the book. The guardsman before him stood in perfect form. A young man, about 25, light-skinned, his crimson uniform crisp and flawless, his massive bearskin hat towering above, his gaze locked straight ahead. Not a muscle twitched on his face. Even when Jack stepped closer, careful not to cross the boundary, but close enough to make his presence impossible to ignore. Jack took a deep breath. Behind him, the crowd carried on as usual, snapping photos, chatting, marveling at the palace. No one expected anything out of the ordinary. And then he began to read. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. His voice sliced through the street noise. Some nearby tourists turned. A few chuckled. Some just shrugged. Tourists were always pulling dumb stunts around the guards. But this was different. This wasn't clowning around. This was a challenge. A challenge thrown right in the face of power. The guardsman didn't flinch. Jack smirked. Big Brother is watching you. But who's watching Big Brother? The crowd fell silent. This was more than just a stunt. It felt forbidden. People began watching, not with amusement, but with real curiosity, as if they had just become part of something bigger. The crowd in front of the palace was changing. What had started as just another tourist stunt was evolving into something else. Jack Henderson didn't stop. His voice grew louder, cutting through the hum of the crowd, forcing people to shut up and listen. Freedom is the right to tell people what they don't want to hear. The expressions on the tourists' faces began to shift. Some smirked, filming the scene on their phones. Others frowned. They weren't sure. Was this just a joke? Or was this man actually cracking the wall of silence? Jack felt the energy rising. He stepped closer. Not close enough to break the rules, but close enough that his voice hit the guardsman like an invisible slap. History is written by the victors. But what if the victors lie? The crowd stirred. Someone laughed. Someone frowned. Someone whispered, "Yeah, what if?" But not everyone was smiling now. Some were listening, seriously listening. Then, from the back of the crowd, a voice shouted, "Keep reading! This is insane!" Others joined in. But this moment couldn't last forever, and within seconds, everything changed. Two men emerged from the crowd, dressed in black suits, stone-faced, moving with deliberate, controlled steps. Palace security. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. Their mere presence was enough to signal that this needed to stop. One of them touched his earpiece. The other stepped forward. "Sir, you need to leave immediately." His voice was flat. No questions, no debate. But Jack didn't move. He locked eyes with the guard. "Why?" His voice didn't shake. "I'm just reading a book. Or are books banned now, too?" The crowd froze. Some laughed, but nervously. Others kept recording, sensing that this was no longer just a stunt. This had become something else. This was now a challenge to the system. Jack feels strong hands gripping his shoulders. A sudden jerk back. For a moment, he loses balance, but doesn't fall. "Hey! Hey!" Voices rise from the crowd. The guards drag him away, not hurting him, but making it clear he has no choice. But Jack doesn't fight with his fists. He fights with his voice. He doesn't scream in pain. He screams the truth. "Truth is not determined by majority vote." His voice cuts through the tense silence like a blade. "And the truth isn't what you allow people to hear. It's what they choose to discover." And then, the impossible happens. The crowd explodes. At first, just a few voices. "Let him go!" Then more. "He's just reading. Why is that illegal?" The emotion spreads like fire. Someone raises their phone higher, live streaming it all. Someone takes a step forward, as if ready to defend Jack. The voices blend into one massive roar. The guards hesitate. The situation is slipping away. They exchange glances. Do they let him go? Do they go through with this? The crowd is no longer just watching. The crowd is demanding an answer. Jack doesn't wait for their decision. He lifts the book high, like a banner. His voice pierces through the chaos. "Power is not in banning the truth. Power is in rewriting it." And the crowd roars. This is no longer a tourist stunt. This is a revolt. Sirens. Distant. But getting closer. Jack feels them before he even sees the flashing blue lights. The police are coming. The guards remain still, but they're waiting for orders. The crowd is electric. Everyone understands. This is bigger than one tourist. And Jack knows it too. He looks at the guards, then at the crowd. He feels his heartbeat pounding in his ears. He has only one move left. To speak, louder than the sirens. "Are we free people, or do we just think we are?" Silence. And then, the unthinkable. One voice, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. "We are free people." Louder. "We are free people." Louder. "We are free people." The police stop. They don't know what to do. The crowd is too big. Someone steps beside Jack, takes off their jacket, stands shoulder to shoulder with him. This is no longer a joke, no longer a tourist stunt. This is a symbol. Any action against Jack now would be a direct attack on the people. And they know it. The police don't move forward. And then, the moment no one saw coming. The guardsman moves. He turns his head. His eyes meet Jack's, and he nods. The crowd erupts. Some shout. Some grab their heads in disbelief. Some throw their hands in the air, celebrating victory. Hundreds of phones capture it. This moment will change everything. Jack smiles. He has won. Even if they arrest him, even if they erase him from this square, he has already said what matters most. The next day, the video blows up the internet. Staged or a real revolution? Did the guardsman actually support him? Or was it just a coincidence? But none of that is the real question, because now millions of people can't shake one thought. Who actually decides what we are allowed to know?